Consider this your contribution to the family." Marvis slid the heavy leather bill folder across the table until it hit my hip. He did not even look me in the eye. He just picked at his teeth, looking bored. "Don't have $8,500? He sneered. "Then scrub the floors. Beg the manager. Or wash dishes until your hands bleed. Just do not embarrass us by making a scene." My stepmother, Deborah, laughed from the seat next to him. "Finally found work that suits you, Maria? I always said you had the hands for manual labor. At least you are not begging us for money today." They looked at my plain black clothes and saw a failure begging for a shift. They did not know I was the owner inspecting my investment. The restaurant manager, Thomas, stepped forward. His face was pale. He opened his mouth to tell them exactly who I was. I shot him a look. "Stand down." He froze, confused but obedient, and stepped back. I opened the folder. $8,500. An obscene amount for a Tuesday lunch. I looked at Marvis. He was waiting for me to cry. He wanted a show. I did not give him one. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I signed the bill. Maria, I did not pay to save face. I paid to buy his arrogance. An arrogant man thinks he is untouchable. And a man who thinks he is untouchable is a man who will leave the door wide open. $8,000 was expensive, but it was a bargain for what I was about to get. I handed the folder back to the server, turned on my heel, and walked away without a word. "See?" Marvis laughed behind me. "She knows her place." He had no idea. He did not know that he had just signed his own warrant. He did not know that the restaurant he was sitting in, the chair he was leaning back in, the very building that housed his arrogance, I owned it all, and I was about to foreclose on his entire life. I drove 3 blocks before I let myself exhale. My hands were gripping the steering wheel of my sedan so tight my knuckles had turned white. It was not a flashy car, no Italian leather or roaring engine, but it was safe, reliable, and entirely paid for, just like everything else in my life. I parked in the underground garage of my building, taking the private elevator up to the penthouse. The doors slid open to a view of the city skyline, a sprawling grid of lights that usually calmed me. Tonight, though, the quiet felt heavy. At 32, I own a portfolio of real estate and companies worth more than Marvis could count in a lifetime. My name is Maria, but to my family, I am just the struggling stepdaughter. The one who wears unbranded clothes, the one who drives a 4-year-old car. The failure. They see what they want to see. For years, I let them. It was a survival mechanism. If they knew what I really had, they would not just ask for favors. They would feel entitled to them. I have already quietly bailed them out more times than I can track. I paid off Emily's student loans anonymously. I cleared Deborah's credit card debt twice, filtering the money through a debt forgiveness program she thought she had luckily qualified for. They took the money, celebrated their good fortune, and went right back to calling me useless. It stings. I will not lie. It burns to be treated like a burden by people you are actively carrying on your back. But tonight was not about family dynamics. It was about business. Specifically, the business of Vanguard Holdings. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city. Marvis is the chief financial officer of Vanguard. He is the man in charge of the money, and yet, he has no idea who signs his checks. That is my fault. Or rather, my strategy. When I acquired Vanguard 6 months ago, I did it through a blind trust. The M.S. Trust. On paper, the owner is a faceless entity. In the boardroom, the chair is empty. I remembered a dinner 2 weeks ago. Another family obligation I could not escape. Marvis had been 3 scotches deep, holding court at the head of the table while I picked at my salad. "The new owner is a ghost," he had bragged, swirling his glass. "Some billionaire recluse named Michael Sterling, probably. Or maybe a shell company for foreign investors. Doesn't matter. The point is, he is absentee. He does not check the books. He does not show up to meetings. As far as operations go, I run that company." Deborah had beamed at him. "You are practically the CEO, Marvis. They are lucky to have you." "They are," he had said, winking at Emily. And when the cat is away, he had not finished the sentence, but the implication hung in the air, thick and greasy. He thought the empty chair at the head of the table meant no one was watching. He thought MS stood for a man who didn't care. He was wrong. M.S. stood for Maria. And I wasn't absentee. I was just patient. I walked over to my desk and woke up my computer. The screen glowed with the Vanguard internal dashboard. I had administrative access to everything: emails, expense reports, audit logs. I could see every move he made. Marvis thought his arrogance was a shield. He thought his title protected him. But sitting there in my quiet apartment, watching his login activity flicker on my screen. I realized the truth. His arrogance wasn't a shield, it was a blindfold. And he was walking straight off a cliff. The voicemail came 3 days later. "Maria, it is Deborah. Pick up." A pause. Then a huff of irritation. "Look, we are short on the floral deposit. The prices have gone up. And Marvis is tied up with assets. We need $5,000 by Friday. Don't be difficult. You know how important this is for your sister." Click. The phone sat on my desk, vibrating with the aftershocks of her entitlement. $5,000. Not a loan. Not a request. A summons. She spoke to me like I was a malfunctioning ATM that just needed a good kick to dispense cash. For years, that tone would have triggered a panic response. I would have scrambled. I would have moved money around, skipped meals, sold things, anything to buy a moment of peace, anything to be a good daughter. But today, the panic did not come. Instead, a cold, quiet clarity settled over me. I picked up the phone, but I did not call Deborah. I called my IT director. "Initiate Operation Glasshouse," I said. "Are you sure?" he asked. "The board might get jittery." "The board answers to me." "Do it." 10 minutes later, a priority memo landed in every inbox at Vanguard Holdings, flagged with a red exclamation point. Subject: Urgent Financial System Migration. Effective immediately, all automated expense approvals are suspended for 48 hours due to a critical server migration. During this blackout window, all C-suite expenditures must be submitted manually. Automatic auditing protocols will be offline until Monday morning. It was a lie. There was no migration. The servers were fine. The blackout window was a honeypot. I sat back and watched the trap arm itself. To an honest employee, this memo was an annoyance. It meant filling out paperwork later. But to a thief, to a man like Marvis, who believed his boss was an absentee billionaire and the oversight committee was asleep at the wheel, it looked like a hall pass. It looked like a chaotic, unmonitored window where he could slip things through the cracks. I watched the internal dashboard. The first few hours were quiet. Marvis was cautious. He was testing the fence. At 2 in the afternoon, a charge appeared. The Capitol Grill. $450. Client entertainment. I pulled the metadata. There was no client meeting on his calendar. He was having lunch with his college buddies. He waited. No red flags, no emails from compliance. The system accepted it. He got bolder. Wednesday morning. Saks Fifth Avenue. $3,200. Corporate gifting. I checked the item SKU. A designer handbag. Deborah had been complaining about needing a new bag for the rehearsal dinner. He was getting comfortable. He thought he had found a magic loophole. The absentee owner wasn't watching, the system was down, and he had the corporate card in his pocket. Then, Thursday afternoon, the big one hit. The notification blinked onto my screen. Red and angry. A pending charge from the Sovereign Hotel. I opened the file. $150,000. The description read, Q3 Strategic Shareholder Retreat. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the thrill of the catch. There was no shareholder retreat. We were not even in the third quarter. He was booking the wedding. He was using my company, my money, to pay for the party where they planned to erase me. He was so arrogant, so sure of his own genius, that he did not just steal a little off the top. He tried to expense his entire life. He thought the blackout window protected him. He did not know that the lights were off for everyone else, but I was watching him in infrared. I did not decline the charge. I approved it. Let him have his party. Let him think he won. The higher he climbed, the harder he would fall. The coffee shop on 4th Avenue was crowded, a haze of steam, and the low hum of conversation filling the air. It was neutral ground. Thomas, the manager of the Gilded, sat at a corner table. He hadn't touched his latte. His hands were clasped tight on top of a thick manila envelope. When I sat down, he did not smile. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent the last 48 hours wrestling with his conscience and winning. I should not have brought these out of the building, he said, his voice low. Technically, it is a violation of guest privacy protocols. You are speaking to the owner, Thomas, I reminded him gently. It is not a violation if I authorize it. I know. But that is not why I am here. He tapped the envelope. I am here because of what he said to you. I have worked in hospitality for 20 years, Maria. I have seen arrogance. But that man. He treated you like something he scraped off his shoe. He slid the envelope across the scratched wooden table. I thought you should see how he coded the deposit. My fingers brushed the cool paper. This was it. The physical manifestation of Marvis's hubris. I opened the clasp and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. The first was the internal invoice from the Sovereign Hotel. It was standard. A breakdown of costs for the O'Connell-Sterling wedding. Grand ballroom rental, $45,000. Catering, Wagyu and lobster, $60,000. Floral arrangements, imported orchids, $25,000. Bridal suite, $10,000. Total projected cost, $150,000. It was nauseating. He was spending a fortune on a party designed to celebrate his status, using money he hadn't earned. But spending money wasn't a crime. Being tacky wasn't a felony. Then I looked at the second document. This was a photocopy of the expense report Marvis had submitted to Vanguard's finance department earlier that morning. It was signed with his flamboyant, looping signature. The total was the same, $150,000. But the line items were different. There was no mention of a wedding. No flowers. No lobster. Instead, under the header Project Code, Strat 24, it read, Venue Rental, Q3 Strategic Shareholder Retreat. Catering, Executive Leadership Summit. Audio, Visual, and Logistics. Presentation Setup. My breath hitched. I stared at the two papers side by side. The reality of what he had done settled in my gut like a stone. He had not just stolen from the company. Theft would have been simple. Embezzlement was a messy, ugly crime. But it was just between him and the company. This was different. By falsifying financial records to claim a personal wedding as a tax-deductible business expense, he had invited a much bigger, much scarier player to the table. He had lied to the IRS. He had committed securities fraud. I looked up at Thomas. He submitted this? It is in the system? Approved and pending wire transfer, Thomas confirmed. Since the audit protocols are down, the payment is scheduled to clear tomorrow morning. I sat back, the noise of the coffee shop fading into a dull buzz. Marvis thought he was clever. He thought he was hiding his theft in plain sight, burying a wedding inside a shareholder retreat. He thought he was saving himself money. In reality, he was constructing a federal indictment. Thank you, Thomas, I said, sliding the papers back into the envelope. You can go back to work. Pretend this meeting never happened. When the wire hits, process the payment. He blinked. Process it? You are going to let him pay for it? I need the transaction to complete, I said, my voice flat. Attempted fraud is one thing. Completed fraud is another. Once that money leaves the Vanguard account and hits the sovereign's bank, the crime is permanent. Thomas nodded slowly, standing up. Good luck, Maria. I watched him leave, then looked back at the envelope. It felt heavy in my hands. Inside was the end of Marvis's career, his reputation, and his freedom. He wanted a shareholder retreat? Fine. I would give him one. I would give him a presentation he would never forget. Monday morning. The Vanguard Holdings boardroom smelled like stale coffee and aggressive cologne. I stood outside the double mahogany doors, listening. Inside, Marvis was holding court. His voice boomed through the oak panels, confident and smooth. We need to trim the fat, he was saying. Fiscal responsibility isn't just a buzzword, gentlemen. It is a survival strategy. If we want to hit our Q4 targets, we need to look at every line item. No more excess, no more waste. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The man lecturing the board on cutting waste was currently wearing a three-piece Italian suit that I had essentially paid for. He was standing there, presenting a slide deck on austerity, while hiding a $150,000 wedding in the company ledger. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer. No more plain black slacks. No more blending in. Today, I was wearing a tailored navy power suit, sharp enough to cut glass. I checked my reflection in the glass panel. The sister was gone. The chairman was here. I pushed the doors open. The room went silent. 12 heads turned. At the far end, Marvis froze mid-presentation, his laser pointer hovering over a chart about cutting employee benefits. In the corner sat Deborah, his mother-in-law, smiling proudly in a chair meant for assistants. When she saw me, her smile collapsed. Marvis laughed, confused. Maria? What are you doing here, lost on the way to the service entrance? Deborah hissed. This is a private meeting. Leave before security removes you. I didn't answer. I walked in. My heels echoed as I passed executives who refused to meet Marvis's eyes. They already knew. I had briefed the board an hour earlier. Marvis sneered, stepping toward me. Interrupting a board meeting? Pathetic. Want me to call the restaurant and get you a shift? I walked past him to the head of the table. The chairman's seat was empty. I sat down and placed my laptop beside his water glass. Sit down, Marvis. He stared. That's the chairman's seat. I said sit down. No one moved. No one laughed. Deborah stood up, furious. This is insane. You are trespassing, I said calmly. Sit down, or you'll be removed. She did. Marvis finally saw it, the fear replacing arrogance. Who do you think you are? He whispered. I plugged in the HDMI cable. The screen behind him lit up. On the left, a declined dinner receipt for $8,500, signed by Marvis. On the right, a $150,000 wedding invoice, Wagyu, lobster, orchids submitted as a strategic shareholder retreat. Just 48 hours earlier, the room was dead silent. You told me to scrub floors to pay for your dinner, I said. But you stole $150,000 from my company to pretend you were rich. He stammered. It's a mistake. A clerical error. Stop. I leaned forward. You have two options. Option A, this was a wedding. That's embezzlement. Prison. Option B, this was a business retreat. That's tax evasion and securities fraud. Federal prison. I leaned back. So, which felony would you like to be arrested for today? Deborah shrieked, accusing me of jealousy and manipulation. I looked at security. Remove her. She froze. Marvis begged. Please, I'll pay it back. Let me resign. I closed my laptop. I found these documents 3 days ago. And I sent them to the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service 72 hours ago. I stood. They're not here to negotiate. The doors opened. Federal agents walked in quiet. Precise. Marvis O'Connell, the lead agent said. You're under arrest. The cuffs snapped shut. As Deborah fled, I turned to security. Seize the company-leased Porsche. Lock out the corporate penthouse. Reset the smart locks. Done. I stopped Marvis as they led him out and whispered, I told you I'd handle the bill. I just didn't say how. Then I returned to the window, sat in the chairman's chair, opened my laptop and got back to work. Marvis thought he was untouchable until he signed the wrong receipt. Have you ever let someone win a small battle just to destroy them in the war? Tell me your story. I read every one.